Don't you dare turn that dial. Don't you dare turn that station, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show, because our guest this evening is State Representative David Harris. He, of course, is a Republican from Arlington Heights, but more importantly, he's going to explain everything to you about pension reform, why we have it, why we don't, what will happen in the next month. We're taping the show on November 18th. And so important stuff's happening in this General Assembly. Lots of stuff that's affecting you, your job, your economy, your wife. Well, I don't know about that, but anyway, don't you turn that station, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show. All right, so we promised that we're going to have a great show this evening, and we are, because Major General David Harris, two-star general, a man who spent 33 years in the military, including 4 years as the commanding general of the Illinois National Guard, a man who's forgotten way more than I'll ever know. Did I say that right? I think so. So David, I was just talking to somebody. I overheard this person say this the other day, that she said that, you know, what the Republican Party really needs if they want to win, because there are a lot of people, she said, out there who could vote Republican who haven't before, who are Democrats and independents, who are fiscal conservatives but social moderates. Okay, you understand?
I understand, yes.
So if you folks would just do that, emphasize the economic issues, she would be with you. Downplay the social issues, because she's not with many Republicans or many conservatives. You guys would win the governorship very easily, and you might even win some other state offices if you can find some candidates. Did she get that right, Major General State Rep David Harris?
Well, let's emphasize state rep. This is not a military interview.
I understand.
It's a
well, you're Major
legislative one.
General retired.
So the emphasis on the social issues is done to try to make Republicans look bad. At the same time, I will tell you that there are indeed lots of individuals who are concerned about social issues. And if we articulate the social issues in a way which is responsive to individuals, is responsive to people, because we don't have to come across as hardcore, I think we will attract those folks who say they don't want to vote for us now. I think it's certainly possible. And I think if you look at just recent elections, we can win elections on a statewide basis.
So what would be your advice? I know you're not the Republican leader in the House. That difficult job goes to State Rep Jim Durkin, right? But you are an influential person, and if Jim came up to you and said, you know, you've been in the state legislature, this is your 13th year, counting your 10 years that you had previously, so you have a feel for this, and Jim said, what should we be telling our new candidates who are running in difficult races where they have to attract many Democrats and independents, and these people are going to want to know what that person's view is about abortion. And let's say that person is running as a pro-life Republican. What should he say when that person comes up to him and says, you know, I really want to know your view on abortion. My main concern is the economic issues, and I think the state's in real trouble, but I'm a little bit afraid that if the Republicans get in power as governor and get the majority, they're going to start pushing hard to remove, say it's a woman saying, my choice to have an abortion.
You put a lot of things in there, Jeff. First of all, you said if the individual is a pro-life Republican and somebody comes up and asks that person, what is your position on abortion? Well, I hope if the person is a pro-life Republican that he or she will answer honestly to the constituent that I vote pro-life.
But how does that person persuade?
Because the one thing you don't want to do is be dishonest with the constituent. Okay. Abortion is one of those issues, kind of like sort of like guns, sort of like other issues that you're either pro-life, you're pro-choice, and if a person is pro-choice, you can respect that position, and if a person is pro-life, you can respect that position, but you're going to differ on the issues.
What do you say? What do you recommend this candidate in the Republican, running as a Republican, as a pro-life Republican, say to this person who he understands, this young lady, who's a Democrat or an independent, but is interested in hearing why she maybe should vote for him because she's concerned about the economic issues in the state of Illinois, and yet she's
Well, if she's
expressed her concern that
If she's
on
concerned
the
about
abortion
if
issue.
she's concerned about the economic issues, she ought to be concerned about the fact that the state is going down the tubes. She ought to be concerned about the fact that her child is going to end up paying debt that we have incurred now years beyond when she is long gone. She ought to be concerned about whether or not her child and her grandchild are going to be able to get jobs in the state of Illinois. She ought to be able to be concerned about economically whether or not the state of Illinois is going to be fiscally sound 20 or 30 years from now. And hopefully this Republican candidate will lay out the rationale as to why that person should vote Republican, because quite frankly, the state has been run by the Democrats and it has been run into the ground for the past 12 years.
So maybe we can get the graphic up showing the Republican gubernatorial candidates and the Republican tickets, governor and lieutenant governor. But as you know, David, as we're getting that graphic up to remind the audience who's running, we have 4 candidates, 4 Republicans in the Republican primary. There they are, okay? We can see the tickets listed as Rutherford Kim, Rauner, can't even read it here, but I should remember her name, Singetti, something like that, Dillard Tracy, and Brady Rodriguez, okay? So now if this person that's talking with you is thinking of the voting Republican, now, she may have been talking about a Republican state rep, but now she's thinking about who she should vote for governor. Do you give the same pitch for those, or well, let me ask you, would your pitch vary depending who won that primary? Could you make the same pitch for those 4 teams that I mentioned, or would it be tailored to them if you eventually were trying to persuade her to vote Republican in terms of the gubernatorial ticket? See the question?
Certainly, and I would tell her the same thing.
Same pitch.
The Democrats have been in control of the state totally. The governor's office, the House, the Senate for the past 12 years, and the state has been run into the ground. And the best way to make a change is to at this time, elect a Republican governor. I'd like to say elect a Republican governor, a majority Republican House, and a majority Republican Senate, but I don't think those latter two are in the cards for this election.
You would hope you could pick up votes, that is, you could narrow the margins in the state House and the state Senate by which the Democrats control. You would hope that? Or do you think you can't even narrow those margins in the 2014 election?
I would certainly hope. The difficulty, and I'll just look at it, Jeff, from the House side.
Okay.
From the House side, we have 10 open seats, in other words, 10 seats that are held by Republicans that the incumbent is not running. We also have 2 seats where an incumbent has left and somebody has been appointed. So those are 2 individuals who have never run in a general primary before, in a general election before. So those are 12 seats that, quite frankly, in many respects, we need to be concerned about. Obviously, the Democrats, in a partisan race, the Democrats are going to say, hey, there's not an incumbent. Let's see what we can do by way of picking up seats. Some of those seats, because of the way the map has been drawn, are safe Republican seats, but others are not. So we have to hold our own. We have to hold all 12 of those before we can even start to pick up more.
Okay, but the conditions you're saying are ripe to hold your seats, right?
Oh, all politics are local. And on a statewide basis, I'm firmly convinced that Republicans can elect candidates on a statewide basis because it does away with those artificial district boundaries that have been drawn so cleverly and so craftily by the Democrats, okay? But look at the last gubernatorial election. 6 million votes were cast, and the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats was only, 30,000?
Right.
In addition to which we elected a Republican treasurer and elected a Republican comptroller. My point there is that when you don't have those legislative district boundaries, but rather you vote statewide, the Republicans can win. On a Republican-Democrat basis, this state is, in my opinion, almost as evenly divided as any other state. Now, it is a Democrat-controlled state, again, because the Democrats drew the legislative map.
Okay, well, taking the easy one, on the governor's side, okay, you're saying you pitch the economy, you pitch the jobs, you pitch the pension mess, and your pitch is that the Democrats have been in control now for the last decade of the State House, of the State Senate,
right.
of the gubernatorial chair, Manchin, and essentially the judiciary. And you came close to winning in 2010, but 30,000 votes, 30,000 votes. And you had a lot of those same conditions present in 2010. How are you going to win this time where you couldn't do it in 2010 with your Republican candidate for governor?
I will tell you that I think the conditions, they are similar, but one could also say that if I were the gubernatorial candidate, I'm not, I don't know how the gubernatorial candidates are going to run their campaigns, but we have now had 4 years of a Democrat governor who has said, I'm going to make changes. The changes aren't for the better, in my opinion. The condition of the state has not improved, in my opinion, and that's grounds for saying, hey buddy, you've had your chance, time to go.
And do you personally prefer any of the 4 Republican tickets to the other?
Right now, I'm uncommitted. We'll see what happens in the next probably month and a half. After the first of the year, you will see a lot of the various organizations start making endorsements, and I'd like to see what happens there. And
So you may make an endorsement, you're saying, before March?
I may.
Or when is actually, what's the
March
date?
March 18th.
March 18th, okay. We're back to that date. We changed the number back.
For a period, yeah.
Okay. And as you know, let's go over to the same-sex issue, because same-sex marriage issue. We'll come back to the governor's race. We're taping this, as I say, on November 18th. What was it, just about a week, 10 days ago, that it passed that the bill passed the State House. It had passed the State Senate, the same-sex marriage bill. Quinn's going to sign that this week, is that right?
I'm not sure. I think he's going to sign it the 21st, 22nd. So I guess that would be this week. It passed on the 5th of November.
Now, a lot of people would say, well, I forget what a lot of people would say. What would you say? You voted against that bill.
I did.
Why did you vote against that bill?
Because I felt that the majority of the individuals in my district were not supportive of the legislation.
And your district is Arlington Heights in large part, but also Mount Prospect and Prospect Heights,
Correct.
right? And you're saying in those 3 suburbs, the great majority of the people, would that be fair
No,
to
I
say?
wouldn't say the
or
great
just the majority?
No, the great majority. That was
What did you say?
That was an
you
issue.
said the people were in favor, but not
Yeah,
in favor of that bill.
I said the majority, not the great majority.
Okay,
I said
majority.
the majority. And look at how the bill passed. The bill only passed with 61 votes.
It needed 60, had one more than it needed.
It's 61 votes.
61-54.
So that tells you how evenly divided people were on and if the legislators represent their districts, which hopefully they do, that tells you how evenly divided the people of the state of Illinois were on this issue. And in my district, I received lots of calls, lots of emails, lots of visits from individuals who said, we support same-sex marriage, and I respect that. But I also received lots of calls, lots of emails, lots of visits from individuals who say, we don't support same-sex marriage, we are supportive of traditional marriage. So there was a decision to make. I made the decision to vote no.
And there are 47 Republicans, and all but 3 Republicans voted no, right?
That's correct.
And there's 71 Democrats, 13 or so voted no, but the great majority of Democrats voted yes. So this was almost, but not quite, a party line vote, right?
Well, it was a bipartisan vote, but there were only 3 Republicans on the bill, yes.
I mean, almost all, except for 3 Republicans, opposed it. Not almost all, but a very large majority of Democrats supported it. Close to a party line vote. What does that tell us about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party? Is this just just this issue, same-sex marriage, or the implications of this vote broader in terms of where the Republican Party is in the year 2013 in Illinois relative to the Democratic Party? Do you see my question?
I do. I do see your question. I think I understand it. I don't know that it says anything specifically about the party. I mean, yes, the Republican Party is probably viewed as being a more conservative party than the Democrat Party, certainly on fiscal issues, in this case on certain social issues. But at the same time, there are a number of Democrats who voted no on the bill. There were a couple of Republicans who
Well,
voted
why do you
yes.
think
So,
that you said the majority of the people in your district oppose it? Why do you think they do?
a general belief in traditional marriage, that marriage is the union of a man and a woman. There were a lot of people who contacted me and said, hey, we have civil unions in Illinois. Civil unions basically give gay couples the same rights as married couples. The difficulty comes not so much at the state level as at the federal level. I think what the feds did confuses the situation greatly in terms of equality and in terms of equal benefits, whether you're married or in a civil union. There's a great confusion because of, I think, of what happened at the federal level.
What happened at the federal
Well,
level?
as an example, if you're a married couple in Iowa, where gay marriage is legal, if you're a married couple in Iowa, you can take advantage of because they recognize those marriages, you can take advantage of the federal benefits that come from marriage. If you're in Illinois, you cannot, well, you still can't because we haven't signed the bill, but you cannot because we don't recognize gay marriage. So, and this is going to become a bigger issue at the federal level for a couple of reasons, but one in particular reason is that, remember, 31 states have a constitutional prohibition against gay marriage. So it's not just the legislature being able to generate a majority to pass a law. You now have a higher hurdle, a higher barrier to get over. You've got to get over a constitutional barrier. And that means there will be a long-term unfairness in federal benefits until that's somehow resolved at the federal level.
Is the tide of history going in the way of making same-sex marriage the law of the land?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Do you know many young people?
Well,
in their
I know my sons.
Okay. Do you think you have a sense of the cross-section of people who are in their 20s and 30s? I mean, you know your son, it's not a cross-section, but you pick up. I mean, you hear this thing that younger people in their 20s and 30s are much more accepting of gay marriage. A number of their friends are, they don't discriminate themselves against them, they don't have trouble with their children playing with kids who may have two moms or two dads. You understand that?
Sure.
Okay. That's what I mean.
And you know what?
And those people are going to get to be 40 or 50. Do you think they're going to change their views? Probably not. So, and the people who are 60 or 70 are eventually going to die. At some point, these younger people become the larger portion of the United States of America, and they think it's okay.
That may be.
Does the Republican Party have to think about changing on this issue? Are they in a tricky position because they have to energize their base, who are opposed to same-sex marriage, and yet to expand their vote among Democrats and independents and eventually pick up this new demographic, they have to modify their views. So they have to energize their base by taking a view that kind of upsets these folks. That young lady who we spoke about earlier in the show, you're trying to win her over, focus on the economic issues. She's going to be upset by your view about same-sex marriage.
You know what, Jeff?
You see, it's a tricky position.
Democracy is a wonderful, wonderful institution. It's the best institution in the world because what will happen is if we, the Republican Party, don't adjust to the demographics, then, and as individuals, conceivably, I could be voted out of office, others could be voted out of office, and guess what?
I'm just talking about the problem with the Republican Party. I was trying to be sympathetic to you guys who are Republicans. I'm not saying I'm a Republican.
You don't have to be sympathetic.
I was just trying to put myself in your shoes and understand what do you do? How do you get a majority if the tide of history is against you?
You don't have to be sympathetic because you use the term in there. Young people they don't discriminate against. Hey, look, the older individuals who believe in traditional marriage. They're not folks who discriminate. They're not folks who don't recognize the dignity of gays. And
they're not.
They're not folks.
They're not gay bashers.
They're not gay bashers. Oh, you're always going to have gay bashers.
But not the great majority.
You're always going to have people who bash certain religions. You're always going to have those sorts of bigots. But you know, the average person out there is not a bigot. The average person in my district is not a bigot.
They just can't accept same-sex marriage.
Acceptance is a different word. They
can't endorse it.
They believe more in the traditional view of marriage.
And so when Paul Caprio, as he said when he was on his show, he's the executive director of Family Pack. You know Paul or know
I know
Paul?
him.
When he said he didn't go to the complicated legal, federal, all the issues, he just said it's about protecting kids. He says there are studies that show kids grow up better having a mom and a dad. And he went further, he says biological parents. I guess Paul would say if you can't have biological mom and dad, at least have a mom and a dad. He says studies show that kids are better protected in society if we don't have same-sex marriage.
That's his opinion.
Do you agree with
That's
Paul
his
on that?
opinion.
What's your opinion?
That's his opinion.
Do you have an opinion on
That's
that?
his opinion.
I know, but
That's
do you
his
have an-
opinion. That's
have an
why
opinion on
he's
that? Okay.
against it. I'm against it.
Reflecting
I voted against it for other reasons.
You voted your
those,
district.
those factors didn't come into
You
my.
voted your district.
Those factors didn't come into my decision.
Was your decision basically voting your district, as they say?
I believe it was. Yes, certainly.
Okay. Now, the main issue you've just said is really the economic issue. People would say the main issue of the day is state employee pension reform. Agreed?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Well, if you disagree, say so.
Well, the main issue of the day is yes, pension reform gets all the attention, but underneath pension reform is a huge issue lurking, which is what we do, the income tax in the state of Illinois.
You mean whether we have a constitutional amendment? Is that what you're referring
Well,
to?
there are two. Basically, there are two
The two
issues.
things.
There are
What
two
are
issues.
those two issues? Why don't you articulate them?
One statutorily, the income tax, which was increased by 67% 2.5 years ago, is due to revert from 5% on the individual level, where it is now, down to 3.75% as
When?
of January 1st of 2015.
Okay.
Which means the budget that we, the legislature, work on for FY15, starting in the spring of next year, the budget that we work on has to factor in whether or not that income tax it stays the same or gets decreased or.
And what do you think?
And the other issue, which many people are pushing, is the progressive tax or the graduated income tax. So those are two big lurking issues.
And what do you think on the first issue? The phrase is sunset. The law is set up. If nothing is done, the income tax increase goes back, not completely, but almost back, most of the way to the original 3%. It goes back to 3.25.
3.75.
3.75.
3.75.
It doesn't go down to 3.25. It's just one step. It's that one change. I thought there was a second step.
Well, there is 10 years down the road.
10 years down the road. So for the
9 years down
for
the
the
road.
short and intermediate term, for the next decade, it just goes back in 2015 it went from 3% to 5%. It falls back to 3.25.
3.75.
Excuse me, 3.75.
Right.
So almost it falls back a little bit more than halfway. And so if you do nothing, that happens. But some people would say you should go further and go back to the original 3%.
Some people would say
What
that.
would you say?
First of all, if we go to, there's a significant budget implication here. If we go down to 3.75% as projected right now, that means a reduction in state revenues of about $2.1 billion. We're at 36-ish.
Okay.
Would be a reduction of about $2.1 billion. Could we handle that? I believe that we could. It would take some trimming. This is where pension reform comes in, because the pension payment is a big one, and if that can be trimmed, that could be handled.
Some say you would save $1.8 billion under the proposed pension reform that's coming out of the pension conference
There's some
committee.
talk of numbers in that vicinity.
And if that's so, then you would save almost as much as you would lose in those two steps, right? Okay.
And so there is some talk of those numbers,
Right.
Those types of numbers out there.
Well, so you favor letting it sunset,
I
number
do.
one, and you think that the budget can be adjusted, we've pointed out one way and there are others,
I do.
to accommodate that reduction of $2.1 billion in revenue.
I believe so.
And the second step you referred to is the adoption of a progressive income tax, which requires an Illinois constitutional amendment, right?
Right, it does. Has to be a constitutional amendment passed by the legislature and then passed by
Is
the
it by
people.
both the House and the Senate?
By the House and the Senate.
A majority of, just a majority?
Extraordinary
Super
majority.
60%?
Supermajority.
60%?
Yeah,
Or 66, I don't know.
71 votes.
That's
3/5.
3/5,
So
60%.
right.
And both the State House and the State Senate have to vote, and if they do, then it goes on the ballot,
Goes on the ballot.
and does it require a simple majority of the electorate, do you know?
Well, it gets a little tricky. It's 60% or a majority of those voting on the question. So
Okay, so it can pass in less than 60% if it's got a
or a
majority.
majority of those voting in the election. I'd have to double check, but it requires.
a little
It's
tricky.
not a
Okay.
simple. It's not a simple 50%
And
plus
do you
1.
favor a progressive income tax?
Absolutely not.
Why?
Because it's an income tax increase.
Yeah.
We just had an enormous income tax increase, and even the proponents say our problem in the state of Illinois is a revenue problem, which I totally disagree with, but they say we have a revenue problem, and the way to solve that is to raise more revenue through a progressive income tax.
Well, then some of the proponents say it'll only raise taxes on 5% of the population, not the great majority, 95%. Do you agree with that?
Do you believe that?
I just asked if you agree with that.
One, I don't believe it, so I don't agree with it. Two, again, it is a tax increase. They are saying it's going to bring in more money. If it's going to bring in more money, guess what? People are going to pay more taxes. And the other thing about the bill is, the other thing about the constitutional amendments which have been proposed is the rates aren't in the constitutional amendment. So we don't know what the rates are going to be.
Well, those will be set by the legislature?
Those would be set by the legislature.
Okay.
Oh, there's a dangerous thought.
You don't trust your colleagues in the State House and the State Senate?
Well,
All right,
I have a concern about the majority Democrats.
And if the State House and the State Senate do put it on the ballot, that'll be a major issue in the election, you would agree?
Oh, absolutely.
And do you think your colleagues in the State House and the State Senate will vote to put the progressive tax issue on the ballot in November 2014?
That is a fascinating question, and initially I would have said no, but I've been surprised by some of my colleagues who have come out in support. So, but it's a high hurdle. An extraordinary majority is a high hurdle.
Is it like a gift almost to the Republicans that this could be a wedge issue for the 2014 election that might allow you to overcome even the gerrymandering of the districts? Because if you could persuade a large number of people that this is not going to only hit higher income people, but lower income people, especially in terms of job loss and a variety of other things for the economy, so that the electorate at large will be hit. You're not a defender of high income people. You're the party of all income people, low, middle, and high. You're the party of employees and employers because you're doing what's best for society. Wouldn't that be the argument?
It could be. That's a good way to put it. It could be conceivably a wedge issue. I mean, especially depending on what position a candidate takes on the issue, certainly.
And I'm not saying I necessarily do. I'm just sort of giving advice. You might take that tack. You understand?
Certainly.
I don't want people to think I
Right.
take positions here.
Right.
No, so in 2014, well, it's hard to know how 2014 shapes up because you don't quite know what's happening with the progressive income tax. But assuming either way, pensions, well, what if the pension conference, you folks were taping this on November 18th, and you've been told by Speaker Madigan and Senate President Cullerton to keep December 3rd open because
Right.
he may call you back in special session, presumably to vote on a pension reform bill. If he calls you back and if it passes, does it take like a major argument, a major issue off the table? Because then the Democrats could say, you can't run on that in 2014. We've now passed pension reform. What do you say to them?
Well, you can run on, it depends on when you say run on that. If you mean run on pension reform, let's see what the pension reform looks like. Let's see what...
Well, you've heard the rumors of what the Pension Reform Committee is proposing.
They're only rumors.
Assuming those rumors are correct, would you support that pension reform?
I'm not going to support anything that I have not seen, okay? I'm not going to say yes or no to anything that is simply just rumor.
Okay. We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll. Time has gone all too fast, but thank you so much, State Representative
talk to
David
you.
Harris.
Yeah.
But let's keep talking. We've got maybe a minute or two left. The COLA rumor is it would be a cost of living adjustment of roughly a half of the consumer price index.
With a floor at 1% and then some sort of a ceiling as well.
Could you support that?
I could support reform
Of that type?
of the automatic annual increase.
But the type we just articulated, could
Something
you vote?
along
Yeah,
something along those lines. We ought to be moving in that type of a direction.
but is that a yes or no? Would you need to know more about that COLA?
You got to look at the bill overall, okay? If all you're doing is saying, okay, it's just a